Well, welcome to Focus Today. Hey, of all people to have today, I am so delighted to have my good friend John Gizzi with us today, and he's the political editor for Human Events magazine, and of all days to have him, and after a night of all nights. John, God bless you, my bud. How are you?
Well, I'm doing just fine, Perry. If I stumble over a few words or say a few wrong things, I ask for forgiveness in advance without penance because I've been up pretty late.
I can imagine you put in a late night. Well, John, I think the obvious question, what do you think happened last night? What was the deal? It seemed like all the polls were wrong.
Well, this is the one thing I would say, Perry. Many polls were right. And I must say, Nate Silver, who analyzes all the polls and gets widespread attention, was disparaged and laughed at by many Republicans. Well, it turned out he was right. Here's why. Barack Obama saw where his votes were. He ran a class warfare-based campaign, and for only the second time in 70 years, or rather I should say the third time in 70 years, a Democratic president has been reelected on the basis of expanding government. And what it tells me is that there are a lot of people who indeed want the government to do things for them, and they manage to have identified this constituency and turned them out. The self-reliance that John Kennedy spoke of when he said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, what you can do for your country," has been replaced by an attitude of, what have you done for me lately? Wow. And I know that many pundits, Charles Krauthammer among them, said Barack Obama saw himself as being the lineal heir to FDR and Lyndon Johnson in enhancing the role of government and taking it to a point where it is in Western Europe. Some people agreed with him, and he won. That said, it was not so much the voters saying, we love Obama, given the closeness of the popular vote,
right,
but we don't want to elect a venture capitalist president.
All right. Now, you kind of hit something there.
And by the way, by way of disclosure, the person who shared that with me was former Mississippi Governor and Republican National Chairman Haley Barbour, whom I saw on the way over to talk to you.
Oh, wow. Well, John, you know what's so interesting? You have to ask the question, was Mitt Romney the right candidate? I mean, why couldn't a Republican beat this president's record?
All right. First of all, God does not give us ideal candidates. De Gaulle once said that the political graveyards are littered with indispensable men. We don't always have the presidents we need or we deserve. Sometimes we do. Mitt Romney stepped to the plate in terms of knowing how to campaign for a national office, knowing the issues, and having the right family and personal values. He was ideal. In the end, the Republican base, as well as more centrist Republicans and many independents, rallied to him. It just wasn't enough. Was he the best candidate we could offer? Of the field that was out there, Newt Gingrich, Ron Paul, and Rick Santorum, I have to say he was. It just was not enough to beat the Obama for America on-the-ground organization, and he always carried the burden of being a venture capitalist and someone worth $250 million.
All right, so obviously Obama used that very effectively against him and hammered him with it, especially in those key states in the East. But really last night boiled down to Ohio, Virginia, and Florida. And I know there's a move in the country, John, to get rid of the Electoral College. What do you think?
Ridiculous.
Yeah, what do you think tonight's or last night's election will do to that effort?
Not much. Listen, I've been around a long time covering politics, and it seems almost quadrennially one can count on calls to abolish the Electoral College and even legislation to do so, as much as one can depend on presidential elections. It just won't happen. Something that's been there as long as this system has, underscoring the fact that we're a republic, not a democracy, is going to stay there. And let me add something. Until about 4 or 5 a.m., Mitt Romney was leading in the popular vote. If it came down to a fact that he won the popular vote and lost the Electoral College, you would not have heard a peep from him or any Republican, because it was made clear throughout the campaign. Republicans stood firm behind the Electoral College in the 2000 election, saying, we are a republic, not a democracy, and they would have abided by the rules.
Early on, Romney didn't even win his home state, Ryan didn't win his home state, and you couldn't see Connie Mack get elected in Florida, and that was long before they called the race. That was probably a key indicator this thing was going to go in the wrong direction.
All right. It's strange that you would mention all of those states, because they were all states considered in play. I had talked to quite a few friends in Michigan, including Oakland County, where Mitt Romney was born and had grown up. And they felt this time they just might be able to do it. Not necessarily because the Romney family is from the Water Wonderland, but because there was such enthusiasm for the ticket, so many people out canvassing. But in the end, the votes in Wayne County, Detroit, and those mobilized by the United Auto Workers gave Barack Obama a narrow lead. It should be pointed out that in both Wisconsin and Michigan, Republicans, with the change of but a few thousand votes, would have won there. And that's why I say when the final story of the making of the president 2012 is written, it will be a testimony to the organizational acumen of Team Obama.
So you're saying that his ground team was obviously better than Romney's?
Romney's was good. Obama's was clearly great.
Now, Massachusetts turned him away pretty resoundingly, along with their Senator Brown got replaced. So Massachusetts went clearly back to the left.
You know, it's funny. I heard Mitt Romney speak one time, and he said if he could have seen that he would have been in politics himself, he would have probably stayed in Michigan. Because, as he put it, Republican town committee meetings in Massachusetts are probably the size of a small restaurant or even a telephone booth in Mackinac Island, Michigan. It's a very difficult state, and it's moved increasingly to the left. Scott Brown caught lightning in a bottle in 2010 over the issue of Obamacare, and that was good for a short time for him. But in a presidential election year with a well-funded Democrat, he could not survive.
Well, John, we spent $2.6 billion, and we know about. And we are no different today than we were yesterday. We have a Republican-controlled House, a Senate controlled by the Democrats, and the same president. We spent $2.6 billion to get to the same place.
No, you're absolutely right. And look, the Senate races, there is nothing that can be said other than the fact that Republicans experienced many missed opportunities out there. Wisconsin, the defeat of former Governor Tommy Thompson.
Yeah.
Ohio, Josh Mandel, considered one of the rising stars in the Republican Party. They called him the American Netanyahu.
Wow.
Lost narrowly to Senator Sherrod Brown. Indiana went for the Democrats. Missouri, which was supposed to be a slam dunk for the Republicans, ended in the survival of Senator McCaskill. I could go on and on. In the House, it's interesting. Republicans going into this election had their largest ranks in the House since 1938.
Wow.
And now that not only will stay the same, but may actually grow. There's a lot of races that are still to be counted and decided right now.
Well, as of last night, they picked up, what, 10 or 12?
I'm not certain at this point. It seems to change all the time.
Right, okay.
And, you know, again, it's hard to kind of add who lost what and where because we went through a redistricting process. But I would say it's a pretty safe bet that Republicans will keep the numbers they had previously and may add to it. And something else, this means that 40% of the Republicans in Congress were elected either in 2010 or 2012. More than not, they were elected with backing from the Tea Party. So that's going to be a very, very strong factor. The particularly when it comes to extending the debt ceiling or the Bush tax cuts.
All right, you bring up some good questions here. Let me ask you a quick one before we go to break. If that turnover in the House, it's 010 and 012, is primarily the results of the Tea Party, what kind of pressure does that put on Speaker Boehner to get with it? Because he doesn't seem to be aggressive with this kind of majority in the House.
Okay, look, here's what I believe. There will be some kind of compromise before long. The Bush tax cuts, in all likelihood, will be extended simply because President Obama knows that he's not going to get anything else done with the House the way it is. He can count numbers like the rest of them.
Right.
At the same time, when it comes to extending the debt ceiling, the president has the upper hand, having been reelected. I think there will be some kind of compromise in the sense that they will probably close some loopholes and try to lower tax rates. Something like this was suggested in the Bowles-Simpson Commission, and a similar compromise was worked by Senator Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania, someone whose credentials on the anti-tax issue were impeccable. Dick Durbin, the number 2 Democrat in the Senate hierarchy, said, this is something we can work with. The White House shot it down. Remember the 2 words, Toomey compromise. You'll hear a lot of it in the days ahead.
What happens to Obamacare now?
Well, barring some kind of a revelation to Democrats in Congress, the Affordable Health Care Act, commonly known as Obamacare, is going to probably take effect. It's already being implemented now through orders in the government agencies. Now, I know Congressman Joe Pitts of Pennsylvania, his health subcommittee of the Energy and Commerce Committee has been working on trying to stop it and stop its implementation. But the fact is it's taking place already. In small hospitals around the country, people are getting 2-page memoranda on what they can no longer do under the rules.
Wow.
And what the punishment is, for example, of not fully finding out someone's from another state when he tries to get health care at that particular institution. And we are going to find all kinds of things. Private health care plans affected, the deductibility that one has in a personal plan, such as when you set aside tax-exempt money for purchase of glasses or prescription drugs or other things.
Yeah.
All impacted.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to roll with it and see what happens. It's just going to be an incredible thing to experience. I want to come back to a couple of other things. Do you think Nancy Pelosi's done now?
No, not at all. And it's the old saying, you can't beat someone with no one. Who is there to replace her?
Okay. What about Hillary Clinton? I mean, do you think the country's ready for another Clinton after 8 years of Obama?
No, and I take her at her word. She's going to probably retire as Secretary of State next year, maybe even at the beginning of President Obama's second term. And I just do not see her really going on beyond anything other than writing her memoirs. And I'll be interested in the chapter on Benghazi.
Yeah, where do you think Benghazi is going to go? I mean, one of the things I heard last night, I don't know if it was flippant or had some legs behind it, and that is that the House now may really press for a Benghazi explanation and do the timelines that could lead to some real wrist slapping of the president.
I've predicted for a long time this is going to come back to haunt Barack Obama, whether he's reelected or retired. The family of Tyrone Wood, the CIA officer who was killed, is not buying the CIA's timeline, and there's talk of a full-blown congressional investigation, what the administration knew and when it knew it. Where this will go, I'm not sure, but we haven't heard the last of Benghazi, that's for sure, and the Republican House is probably going to pursue it doggedly.
Well, I am surprised that Boehner didn't manage the power he had the last 2 years to be more aggressive against the president. So what makes us think he's going to do anything with it now?
Well, remember something. There's more of a burden on John Boehner's shoulders. one has to realize that he's the last man standing, in a sense. As the leader of the last branch of government not in Democratic control, he has a lot of burden to be a watchdog on the administration, and everything from extending the debt ceiling to the extension of tax cuts to the implementation of the Affordable Health Care Act, as well as any new proposals that come out of the Congress. He's a player.
So we're basically gridlocked again. I mean, this could almost be a good thing. I mean, I don't know, but it seems like to me we're divided. We're as a country, and now we got this gridlock in Washington. So, and this president now can no longer blame the previous administration because he is the previous administration. Exactly.
And remember something, as a student of history, Perry, I can tell you, presidents in their second term historically do not accomplish all that much and, in fact, have a harder time. President Truman won a tremendous upset in 1948 by being elected to a full term and brought in both the Senate and the House with him. And then he had a god-awful time, from scandals within his own White House to investigations of communist infiltration of government, to the Korean War, and inflation and the cost of living going up tremendously. Even people who worked for him and loved him said that second term was awful.
Now, in our own backyard, John, it looks like the turnout was below what was expected, and we're talking a presidential year here, but we may be as high as 10% off from what we thought would be a turnout in our own backyard. Do you see that across the country from last night?
No, I don't. And in fact, the lines were long, even with early voting in Virginia and other places. Right now, all the information I have is anecdotal, but I think you're going to find just from the total of votes that were out there, where Barack Obama and Mitt Romney both got the most votes ever cast for the nominees of the two major parties, you're going to see a larger than usual turnout.
All right, so where do we go, Coach? What do you think we're in for? The John Gizzi 4-year prediction.
4-year prediction is this. Okay. James Baker, the former Secretary of State, once said, overnight is an eternity in politics.
Yeah.
Is this a setback for the party? I'd call it a disappointment. Republicans didn't win the presidency over an incumbent they held in minimum high regard.
Right.
They didn't win control of the Senate. They did keep the House of Representatives. They are in control of the governorships and most of the legislatures in about 30 states right now. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of power, and rumors of the Republican Party's death or calls for it to somehow rewire its message, well, as Mark Twain would say, they've been greatly exaggerated. My guess is if the Republican Party needs anything, it needs fresh ideas along with fresh faces.
Yeah.
Paul Ryan certainly understands that.
Yeah.
He's a leader right away. For those who say that this election was a watershed mark or a turning point, what I would just say is, just remember 2010, when Republicans won control of the House, very nearly won the Senate, all on a conservative agenda, and more importantly, gave a bumper crop of new leaders, Marco Rubio, Scott Walker, Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania, and so many others that are out there, Susana Martinez of New Mexico. The Republican bench is good for the future and right.
John, thank you. I know you're tired, and I value greatly our friendship and your time this morning. God bless you, friend. Hang in there, and we'll catch you in a couple of weeks when you're back on top of things and see where we go, okay?
Look forward to it, Perry.
Thank you.
And I didn't stumble too much when I spoke either.
You did fine. God bless you, pal.
God bless you.
Bye-bye. John Gizzi with us today. He's the chief political editor for Human Events magazine.